Welcome back to Asia Tonight. In business news, the coronavirus outbreak could wipe out tens of billions of dollars in revenue for airlines. Carriers around the world have been reducing capacity and warning of a hit in earnings as COVID-19 continues to curb travel demand. The International Air Transport Association says demand in January saw the slowest monthly growth in a decade. At just under 2.5%, it was half that of December. IATA now estimating revenue losses of up to $113 billion this year. Lufthansa joins other airlines implementing cost-cutting measures. The German carrier is grounding 150 aircraft out of a fleet of around 770. And it's also extending the suspension of flights to China and Tehran until late April and reducing services to northern Italy. The coronavirus outbreak was the nail in the coffin for British regional carrier Flybe. The struggling airline narrowly avoided collapse in January, but it's now gone into bankruptcy protection after COVID-19 compounded its financial woes. Flybe has grounded all flights, leaving thousands stranded, and around 2,400 jobs are in limbo. It's the first airline to go under since the outbreak began. Now, Brian Pierce is Chief Economist at IATA, and he joins us now. Brian, thanks for joining me. So let's look at IATA's estimate for passenger flight revenue losses. It says that this year it has multiplied from around $29 billion to between $69 and $113 billion now. So is the industry anticipating the outbreak to stay on for a while longer?
The typical pattern is that the worst point in disease outbreaks is 3 months after the outbreak. Typically, it bounces back 6 months after that. We don't really know. But I think the key thing in this one is that there's been such a big fall in passenger demand. Bookings now are down very sharply, and it's not just in Asia Pacific. It spread to Europe and the Middle East.
So we're seeing airlines reducing flights, grounding planes, and so on, just to try and cut costs. Do you think these will be enough to actually mitigate the losses incurred, though?
We've seen oil prices fall by about $13 a barrel. Fuel is the biggest cost, and airlines have been taking out costs wherever they can. But such is the scale of the revenue shock. A lot of airlines are in a very fragile position because margins are so thin.
Well, you mentioned that, all the airlines are in a difficult position. Do you think the airlines are going to take any concerted or coordinated measure in response to this virus outbreak to help ease the pain somewhat? After all, we saw G7 central bankers coming together.
Well, it's a free market. It's a very competitive market, but airlines are going to be taking individual actions. As you know, aircraft are being parked, jobs are being lost, salaries are being cut. But it's a big cash flow shock for an industry with very thin margins and quite fragile balance sheets for the majority of airlines. So, some support to keep services alive may well be necessary.
Well, you mentioned that to each its own, it's a free market, but what do you suggest airlines do to actually keep afloat now then?
Well, airlines, as other businesses, are looking to take out any costs that they can. It's a very capital-intensive industry. Aircraft are very expensive assets, so even if they're parked, the airlines have still got to pay banks or lessors, and so some understanding and support from the banks may be necessary, and also some help from governments on issues like slot rules at crowded airports. I think a waiver is necessary there to stop unnecessary flights just in order to keep the slot.
Okay, speaking of these unnecessary flights, Singapore just, returned a Turkish airline flight empty, leaving just crew and flight passengers. No passengers, just the crew, because there was a case of COVID-19. Do you see that happening going forward with other airlines flying empty because of this?
Well, hopefully not. The airlines obviously have to respond to local local rules and particular circumstances. So, particularly if governments take a sensible position in response to the use of slots at crowded airports, this shouldn't be an issue. But I wouldn't underestimate the cash flow pressures that airlines are under at the moment.
Brian, many people have put off travel plans because of COVID-19, but does IATA expect demand to return after the COVID-19 situation, and how quickly?
Well, what we've seen in past disease outbreak episodes is that demand does return quite quickly once the crisis is over. With the SARS episode, with other similar epidemics, we saw a recovery in travel to pre-crisis levels 6 or 7 months later. We really don't know this time whether this is different. So IATA is doing all it can to help airlines take costs out of their business and have a sensible response to help consumers and the businesses that are dependent on good air transport services.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Brian Pierce, Chief Economist of the International Air Transport Association.